Good morning to each one of you. Welcome.
Good morning.
My name is Marcia Booty, and I am privileged to work.
Take the teaching and learning class through the main partnerships and comprehensive literacy, and at that point realized that even though I'd been teaching reading and writing workshop, I really wasn't teaching reading and writing workshop in an apprenticeship. I provide professional development for the coaches in training and for the current coaches, and yes.
Educators in this building, but for coaches across the system in the RSU in the other 5 towns.
That's correct, and I would add to that, I also serve as a thinking partner to administrators
Alrighty.
and people at the central office.
All right, thanks.
High school, mostly seniors, freshmen and seniors, till I came here, and now I teach 5 to 8 social studies. It's quite a change.
Alrighty, and when you were in Massachusetts and you were working with those students who were freshmen and seniors, what was the content area you were teaching at that point?
At that time I was teaching was American government for 9th grade. It was sort of, they gave you the key to the room, and this is your book, and here you go. You were expected to be the sage in the front of the room dispensing the information to the kids, and you were the source of where they were going to get what they were going to learn. And it was hard because you were given a limited amount of time to cram a lot of information in.
Sure.
And even when I first came to this job, the main learning results were a list of, for social studies, were a list of 350 things, people, places, and dates that you were supposed to cover within a certain amount of time. And it was hard to get to that time. It was hard to cover everything all at once, and there was a lot of pressure for that.
Yeah, I can imagine, only imagine. So currently, as you serve these 5 through 8 students, you're doing that through a social studies class?
Yes.
Alrighty. And you are teaching all students in grades 5 through 8?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. And do you perceive yourself as the sage on the stage at this juncture?
No, it's hard not to do that sometimes, but really no. After working with Kelly for the past year, a lot of my kind of philosophy, not my philosophy, but my methodology has really changed quite a bit. I always wanted every child to learn and for them to become lifelong learners, and I hope they would love history as much as I do. But now it's a whole different approach to it. I used to be so worried about getting the content in. You know, we're going to get these names and dates, and we're going to get these people and talk about these important things that happened in history. And now I kind of have a different approach to it. We're going to get all that, but it's not going to be mostly it's not going to be me in the front of the room kind of spouting off knowledge that I have. We're going to kind of collectively do it in a different way.
Ooh, interesting. So this collective design, this different way, this working with Kelly, what does that mean for you and your students on a daily basis?
Well, it really means that we've worked really hard. I've worked really hard this year with Kelly to come up with a good classroom routine of really kind of having explicit learning targets that we're going to meet, that we're going to try to meet this particular goal today, with me giving some explicit instruction, them having some guided practice time to work on it themselves, and then some independent time, and then a wrap up at the end where we come back and talk about how well did we do as a community of learners today. And it's kind of interesting because I haven't done it with everything yet. It's kind of one of those processes where it's been 6th grade and 5th grade, both blocks of 5th and both the 6th grade, and with 7th and 8th, I'm kind of trying to mold that into it. It's hard to do it all at once. It's hard to shift gears completely, but the more success I have with it, I tried it with 6th grade and it worked great. And then I said, okay, let's try it with 5th grade, and it worked really well. And now we're ready to branch out into the older groups.
Sure. As I hear you using the language of explicit instruction, learning targets, guided practice, independent work, wrap up, That sounds to me like a model of gradual release.
Mhm.
In essence, you begin providing the heaviest instruction and then work away from that
Yeah.
as children take on, or young adults take on more learning. What are you seeing for a return on that? How are your students doing with outcomes?
Well, it's twofold. There's a couple of really good ones. They're building bigger skill sets where they can do some of the stuff more independently, and it becomes so much more easier the more you get into the routine of it. And they become more independent as you go, and it's less of the sage in the front of the room and more of kind of the facilitator.
I see.
And that's worked out great. And then, like the other parts I talked about a lot about was the content. You know, I used to worry about content. How are we going to get this content in? And they do get it, though. They get it just from a different avenue.
Okay.
It's not me dispensing the content about it. We're going to read this article, and they're going to be able to use the skills that they have to draw. So we'll still be able to talk about what made Alexander the Great great.
Sure.
And they'll be able to come up with the facts and the evidence themselves, and it's worked out pretty well. And also the other part of it too is there are kids who will need more support, and by doing it this way, you're kind of built in time to make sure they get the scaffolding and the support that they need before they're ready to jump off and do it on their own.
Got it. How about behavior? Have you seen a shift with an increase or a decrease? As I think about that learning community that you have in your classroom and the shifts you've made, are there any differences in behavior?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up. At the beginning, when we talk about, like, one of the questions we would do that we kind of get in the routine was, how do we do as a community of learners today? And that was tricky wording just to spit out the first couple of times.
Yes.
So I'm like, community of learners, all right, yeah, okay. But they get invested in it, and they'll give you really good feedback at the end of the day. Did we meet our target today? Well, no, we didn't today because we got hung up on such and such. Or no, we got a little, or yes, we met that really well today, we did really well. And with the sixth grade in particular, I kind of dispense classroom jobs, and one of them is to, remind me to do the wrap-up, that, we have
Sure.
to, the wrap-up's an important part. And they're really, at the beginning, they're very hard on each other. They can be really tough on each other, and then gradually they're, this is the routine of what we're going to do.
Sure.
And if I could just add something that I've observed that the students have come away from this work with is a sense of agency. They see themselves as readers and writers of historical information. And because of John's explicit teaching, they are approaching whatever they're doing as a reader of historical information and as a writer. So he's teaching for reciprocity, and he often addresses them as, okay, as historians today, as
Yeah.
historians, this is the strategy that we are working on so that we can access this text. And as writers of history, these are the strategies we're working on. And that's all because of his explicit teaching, the gradual release of responsibility, and his apprenticing them in that way.
Well, one of the things that Kelly just mentioned was, one of the buy-ins for them this year was, I do like to talk to them and call them the young historians or young archaeologists. As young archaeologists today, what evidence are we going to look for to support our idea, and they like that.
Of course.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Wow. It really fits into that developmental plane of them no longer becoming children, yet on their way to adults and growing into that intellectual environment.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Another part, like as I think about this, we're doing it now I'm moving it with fifth grade, and fifth grade this year is geography. A lot of it is skills that I talk to them about that they're going to use later on. So next year, when we try this, we're going to have you next year, and we're going to do this kind of writing, we're going to do this kind of reading. This will be really good practice for us next year. So when we come into this, and there's kind of that end goal in mind of that we're going to keep, this is going to keep moving forward with them all the
Sure.
time.
Sure, that makes sense, makes sense. Well, Kelly, as you work with this educator whose pedagogy is exploding, as you work with him, as you work with teachers at the Etna Dixmont School and across the RSU, what advice would you give other teachers that you've seen John take on as a self-regulated educator?
I think that the openness to trying something new and just looking at something from another lens. I think the coach's role is to go slow with this, because John and I have worked together sporadically
Yeah.
over the years to look at the workshop approach and the gradual release, and this year have just worked more intensively. So it's been,
Got it.
his learning has been layered and his practice has been gradual.
Yeah.
You know, for all of us, mine has been, you know, the way that I've coached him has been
Sure.
gradual.
Yeah.
And giving John things to think about that he's ready to take on, just like we would with our students.
Sure.
Where is he? What does he have control over and partial control over, and what does he need next?
Got it.
I've really liked when Kelly and I meet and we talk about it, and one of the things is she mentioned, what data do you want me to look at when I'm in the room today? And so we'll pick a particular thing that we want Kelly to look at in my teaching, and then we'll come back and talk about it later. And I think a lot of what Kelly was just saying was absolutely true. A lot of it is, a lot of it has to come from the buy-in of the teacher. You gotta be willing to do it. And I will be honest with you, I was, you know, I've been teaching a long time and I had been pretty comfortable doing what I'm doing, and you know, I don't need this, and but it wasn't working very well. It was hard. It was carrying a huge weight.
Sure.
It helped make this so much clearer, and it made the kids' understanding so much clearer. And after a while, it was really obvious to me. Not even after, it was a little while, that this was a good way to get this done.
Got
And it doesn't have to be the teacher in the front of the room. You know, you can teach an old dog new tricks. Yeah, it's worked out great.
And not only he asks me to look at data around his teaching, but we always look at student data as
Right.
well. And he brings that
Yeah.
in his hand and to show evidence of student learning.
Well, one of one of my focuses this year is that more kind of goal-focused planning for the next lesson, and what's that going to look like. And so Willie will sit down and talk, and we'll say, okay, these 5 have it, these 5 almost have it, these 5 need some support.
Sure.
And so then the strategy becomes for the next day, what are you going to do with the 5 to bump them here to here, and how are you going to keep the top 5 engaged?
Sure.
And that
Sure.
becomes kind of the way the next thing goes. And it's not, well, I've covered from 1812 to 1816 today. It's more, how am I going to meet these students' needs rather than get through that content material.
Got it. Amazing. So I hear you saying, I think, that you and Kelly have figured out how to keep all these balls in the air and using today's lesson to plan for tomorrow and every day thereafter
Right.
for further instruction.
Yeah.
Great.
It doesn't, and I used to be really nervous about it, that how am I not going to have this roadmap for the next month
Yes.
of what I'm going to do? And oh, wow, I need this planned out. I need my next unit for the next 6 weeks. And it's not that I don't have the unit planned out. I have my idea in my head, but the lessons change based on what the kids need and how that's working. And it's working really great for these 5, and they need this support. And these 5 almost have it, and they need this. And these 5 really need some extra scaffolding. And you can get, for a while, I was the non-believer. I was like, there's no way this is going to work. It'll be, I don't have 3 heads. I can't be in the 3 different places at once. But it really does work if you allow yourself the opportunity to give that gradual release and give them some things to work on their own. And the other the fun part is, after a while, they're really good at helping each other, which is one of those things that before I would be kind of hesitant about. they're really good at when they do their turn and talks or when they do their practice with each other. They give each other really constructive feedback about the way your writing is going on this. And remember last time we talked about this.
Sure.
And that's a really helpful. And they all have bought into it, which is great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Wow. Well, thank you both for sharing your reflection with me and with other folks. You would allow me to publicly share this
Absolutely.
with other educators and coaches across the country.